Hey guys, I wanted to send out this quick video just with a couple of things to think about tonight as you're winding down your day, winding down your week. Sometimes we get caught up in thinking that we have an infinite amount of time. It's not until a storm in our life kind of shakes us and jars us that we really realize that, number one, we're not immortal. Number two, the time we have is precious and valuable. The relationships, the people around us really do matter. And it's not until sometimes those things are threatened that we really realize the intrinsic value of all that we have. You know the old saying, you don't know what you have until you don't have it anymore, or you don't know what you have until it's lost. There's many different ways of saying that same thing. Sometimes that's really true. And my hope working with people, now having helped people lose 100, 200, 300 pounds, what I serve to do in those instances is bring the future of where they're headed to the present so that they can avoid that catastrophe that poor choices leads to over time. You know, the problem with failure is that it's subtle, that people don't ever set out to intend to fail. I don't believe in this whole notion that people sabotage their success consciously. I think what happens is they start to become neglectful in small little ways, and by 1, 2, 3, 4 millimeter little changes, they alter the trajectory of their future in monumental and oftentimes catastrophic ways. So what I want to offer you this afternoon is this. Number one, you need to ask yourself, are you fulfilling what you believe your purpose is? And when you really stop and ask yourself that question, you say, well, how do I know what my purpose is, Charles? I mean, I'm barely getting by. Number one, if you're not feeling good every day, if you're waking up and you don't have energy and you don't look in the mirror and feel happy with the person staring back, obviously you might want to think about changing the strategy that you're living by. One thing that I found, having once weighed 360 pounds, was it was almost impossible to get in touch with what God's purpose was for my life because I was so burdened by simple things. It's Halloween time right now, right? And as a kid, growing up overweight and bullied, I would avoid all relationships because relationships in my mind equal pain. To put myself out there, to let myself be vulnerable at the threat of being hurt, made fun of, teased, ridiculed as a child, those things are things you really try to avoid. I just avoided everything. The problem is when you build a wall to block out pain, you also block out all the good. You need to ask yourself if you built a wall around yourself because of your own choices. And I had a whole script, an entire storyline to say, well, here's the reasons I am the way I am. And ultimately, the only reason I was the way I was because of the things I was doing. If all the things that I was blaming for my circumstances changed overnight, I would still have been 360 pounds, wearing a size 52-inch pant, unable to get upstairs, with very few friends. It wasn't until I recognized that I was in charge that my life changed. So the question I have for you this afternoon is, who's in charge of your life? Where have you put the center of control? Is it you that's in charge and you fully take responsibility? That is, you have the ability to respond? Because here's the issue. If the problem's not in the room, it's very difficult to solve it. So if you put the problem outside of yourself and say, well, if this person was different, then everything would be perfect for me, that means that ultimately the future of your life and whether or not you're happy in your life is dependent on someone else. And I don't think any intelligent designer, whether or not you believe in God, Allah, Buddha, whoever, I don't think anyone would have structured life in that way where your happiness is dependent on someone else. Ultimately, I think happiness is a product of having pleasant thoughts most of the time, feeling good about things most of the time. And if you don't, you've got to ask yourself, why don't you? Well, I know weighing 360 pounds, it was nearly impossible to feel good most of the time because physical things were painful. Getting in and out of a car, walking from the car to the curb, going upstairs, approaching other people to communicate. All those things were really, really anxiety-inducing things to me because I was anticipating rejection, I was anticipating pain, I was anticipating being teased and made fun of. And if you can relate to these things, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right? So the first thing you need to do is ask yourself, who's in charge of your life? Second thing you need to ask yourself is, are you really living? In other words, are you just getting through the day, or are you actually taking stuff from your life? Because as we think that time is infinite sometimes, and it's not only until someone passes or until someone's diagnosed with an illness that we really realize, wow, we only have so much time. Do we really take stock of what we have? So you need to ask yourself today, are you really living? And ask yourself if these little withdrawals you're making by making poor food choices day after day, week after week, month after month, these withdrawals you're making ultimately from your future, are they worth it? You know, because if you're unable to really love yourself because you feel defeated all the time, because you're not staying consistent with a standard you've set for yourself, it's difficult to really take much from life or to enjoy it. Ultimately, what we're here to do is love ourselves and ultimately love other people. Make a positive impact with the gifts that God's given us. And if your health is getting in the way of doing that, you have to ask yourself, well, what's dictating your health? In the majority of cases, a lot of it depends on your choices. And I know that sometimes can feel harsh to recognize that, wow, you mean I'm overweight and unhappy and unhealthy because of things I've done? But once you accept that, once with that acceptance, you can then accept that if you're in charge, you can change it. If someone else is in charge, the only person who can change it is them. And I don't think anyone would be happy depending on someone else to have the lifestyle that they want to have. So take charge of your life by recognizing that you are the person controlling it. With that recognition, you can start to chart yourself toward a really compelling, exciting future if you're willing to embrace the discipline to get there. And if I can be of help, I'd be honored, humbled, and privileged to do so, but you've got to be willing to do the work. All right, so enjoy your weekend. Hopefully you begin to think about really who's in charge of your life, accepting that it's you, and you start to do some things a little differently to get life up to the standards that you want. God bless and take care.